All right. Our end card today is just dot 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 because I don't know what to say anymore after. I don't have any witty things to say after a 5-game losing streak. Welcome back to the Throw the Jets podcast. We've got a full house tonight, joined by Erik Frenz of Boston.com and the Bleacher Report, along with Rogers and Cole Patterson of Turn the Jets. We're going to jump right into Jets Pats because even though Jets Broncos ended about 5 minutes ago, the Jets are kicking off again in about 5 minutes. So it's these crazy turnarounds in these Thursday night games are exhausting for everybody. So Erik, how you doing, first of all? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you got it. No problem. I'm doing well. I hope you guys are doing well also. I know it's been a tough season down there for you guys.
We're hanging in there. We're battle tested. So obviously, after the Kansas City game, I think everybody kind of prematurely raced around, ready to bury the Patriots. It seems to happen every few years or so early in the season. What has been the main difference the past 2 weeks against Cincinnati, obviously on national TV, and then last week going into Buffalo and beating a pretty good team, at least defensively? What's really been the main reason for this turnaround and 2-game winning streak?
Well, first I gotta correct you, Joe, because it isn't every few seasons. It's every single season that the Patriots slip up early on. Everybody's ready to bury them as soon as they slip up, and I think that's kind of just been the expectation around here is that the Patriots are going to come in, they're going to roll over everybody, and they're going to go right to the AFC Championship game. And over the past few seasons, it hasn't been quite that way. It's been a little bit of a slow start for them, and I don't think this is really uncharacteristic for them. But I do think that it did look particularly bad in the first 4 weeks of the season, but the big difference has been the offensive line play, because that was really the big problem for the offense at the start of the season, and really even last season early on as well, was just that group was not buying enough time for Brady, who really is a pocket quarterback and needs to have time and a clean pocket to function properly. So I think they've just played a lot better up front in the Bengals game. It was the group of Brian Stork and Dan Connolly and Ryan Wendell next to him, and then this past week Dan Connolly got a concussion in the middle of the game. Brian Stork wasn't even available at all, and then they had to kind of roll with the punches there in terms of Ryan Wendell playing at center and having some new guys in at guard too. So I just feel like that interior group has played a lot better, and that's really helped Brady to have some time and some room to throw.
Speaking of that interior group and injuries on the whole, we know New England got pretty banged up on Sunday. What are you anticipating in terms of how shorthanded they're going to be on the offensive line, and how are they going to adjust to the absence of Mayo and Ridley on a quick turnaround?
Yeah, Dan Connolly and Ryan Wendell both didn't practice again today with those concussions, so it doesn't look good for them right now. And obviously on a short week, I mean, any negative indication of their availability is probably not a good sign. So I would say right now they probably will be without both of those guys, and obviously the Jets have some pretty talented defensive tackles and defensive line, some defensive linemen. But I do think that that group is going to have a tough test in front of them, and even at the linebacking spot as well. I feel like that's been a spot where they don't have a lot of depth. And having lost Gerard Mayo for the season now, I think that's really going to be a spot where teams are going to try to expose them a bit.
Connor, any questions for Erik on Jets Pats or this upcoming matchup in less than 48 hours now?
Yeah, one thing I want to know is, and I personally think it'll happen, do you think the Jets get back to the ground and pound this week with Ivory and obviously have some success because on 7 that they'll be okay for the rest of the year? I just think it's hard in a 3-day transition to really, establish that leadership and just obviously a presence in the middle like Mayo. How do you think the Jets run the ball Thursday night?
Well, I think as far as the leadership goes, I mean, they were without Gerard Mayo last season too, so they're used to moving on from Mayo. And guys like Dante Hightower, he stepped up pretty big for them last year as a communicator for that defense. Devin McCourty also had a pretty big role in communication. And the talent drop off is obvious. I mean, Deontay Skinner is not Gerard Mayo, and he never will be. So I think that is a good place to start if you're going to attack the Patriots. I think you want to try to run the ball. That's been when they've struggled on defense. It's been because teams have been able to run the ball on them. But the problem is the Jets run a power blocking scheme. It seems like they have a lot of power runs behind fullbacks, and I'm not sure that's really the best way to go about it. A lot of the teams that have had success against the Patriots have done it with zone runs to kind of isolate, guys like Chandler Jones and Vince Wilfork. Get a couple of guys on Wilfork and move him out of the picture. Get Chandler Jones blocked out of the way as well. So if they can open up some holes in the middle of that line, I think they should have some success running the ball.
Cole, question for Erik on the Jets-Pats matchup coming up here. New England 4-2, Jets 1-5. Question for Erik on our beloved friends from Massachusetts.
Yeah, actually, I kind of want to just sort of flip Connor's question around because I know Stephen Ridley's out for the game rest of the season, and I want to know if you think Vereen can safely step into that role, or is it going to be more of a committee situation with Bolden and White?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a committee situation. As far as James White goes, though, he hasn't been active yet, so I have a hard time buying into him and his contributions to the team. But he was a practice player of the week this past week, so they do have some faith in what he can do on the field. It'll be interesting to see if he gets a little bit more attention this week. But definitely for now, I would say Brandon Bolden's going to get a lion's share of the carries. I don't think Shane Vereen is really the same type of back as Stephen Ridley. He's more of a scat back. He's not really going to get you much between the tackles. So I would have a hard time believing that Shane Vereen could be a guy to carry the load in that sense. So I would probably be betting on seeing a lot of Brandon Bolden in that role.
Erik, before we let you go, I think the last line I saw was Pats +9. What's your prediction for Thursday night? Tight game. You think New England pulls it out and kind of keeps rolling along here in the AFC East? What's your prediction?
I think it's going to be a really tight game. I think the 4 days is a kind of an equalizer because, both teams are on a short week, so they don't have a whole ton of time to prepare for each other. So there's no real upper hand in terms of the Belichick versus Rex Ryan rivalry, in terms of that coaching rivalry between the two of them. Obviously, Rex Ryan's a great coach in his own right, but certainly I think the 4-day lack of rest for both teams is going to be kind of an equalizer there. I think the Patriots have some weaknesses still, even though they've won the past 2 games by healthy margins. I think they have some weaknesses that could be exposed by the Jets, and that defensive line, they're just so talented. It's going to be really hard for that offensive line to hold up for 4 quarters. So I'm going with a 19-16 finish here. I think a lot of field goals in what's supposed to be a sloppy game. Going to be some pretty wet conditions down here or up here in Foxborough. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
All right, Erik, thanks for taking the time tonight. We'll talk to you a little bit after the game. Erik Frenz, Boston.com, Bleacher Report, on Twitter at Erik Frenz, correct? Right, I got that right?
That's right. You got it.
Make sure to give the man a follow. Does great work. One of our favorites, especially when it comes to our rivals. So thanks again, E.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. Always good.
Yeah, thanks, Erik.
You got it.
Erik.
All right, now it's just the 3 Jet fans, the 3 Jets writers, and talking about their 1-5 team. Connor, I'll start with you. Just thoughts of the Jets-Broncos game on Sunday, as it panned out, reaction to how they played, overall thoughts on the game.
To be honest with you, I wasn't even really that disappointed. There's a couple things on the offensive side of the ball that are really a big letdown right now. The biggest thing for me is, the media and a lot of people are putting all the blame on the offensive line, which is fine. They deserve a lion's share. But when you're watching Geno Smith drop back, he's just forming terrible habits that you hope he would break at this point. He's staring at the rush, and even when you watch a team like the Rams last night, a third-string quarterback like Austin Davis, the rush comes and the guy stares down the field the entire time. He plants his feet and he makes the throw and he gets clobbered. But with Geno, it doesn't matter if only one guy gets beat, which Von Miller pretty much won his matchup every single time on Sunday. Geno just stares at him, and he doesn't have the foot speed like a guy like Michael Vick or even like a Cam Newton who's strong and fast to get out of the pocket or move. He's clunky. The footwork's been terrible. Like I said, it's just staring at the rush. It's really disappointing to see. But he is a guy that when he is kept clean, he has his bright moments. And I thought the throw to Amaro in the end zone was a really good sign. He's clicking with Decker, and it's a different offense with Decker on the field. So positive takeaways there. you just like to see him break these habits for evaluation purposes, and really get the offense going. On the defensive side of the ball, I thought the game plan was actually spectacular. It was exactly what I wanted them to do. I wanted to sit 8 in the field, and it worked perfectly. I mean, there was a couple blown coverages, but when you're trotting out Phillip Adams, who actually has played pretty well, but just essentially guys that are off the street or should be on the street, it's just no hope. And it's not fair to Rex Ryan at this point, who I've criticized heavily this year, but he had a perfect game plan for that. Sheldon Richardson and Mo Wilkerson are 2 of the best defensive linemen in the league. And without them, the Jets would lose every game like they did to the Chargers by 31 points. But unfortunately, they keep them around in the game by pressuring some of these best quarterbacks in the league.
Cole, your thoughts on the game? Jets were up 7-3 early in this game, seemed to be on the verge of getting blown out at 24-7, then scrapped back to 24-17 before late pick 6. What were your thoughts on what you saw on Sunday?
I think the Jets are kind of a tease in that way. They got up against the Broncos, got up against Green Bay, and they look competitive. Down the line, fourth quarter, it all starts just to unravel. And I don't know if that's a coaching thing, if it's a preparation thing. You could point the finger at numerous different culprits. The secondary started breaking down by the end. Like Connor was saying, you couldn't really scheme much better against the Broncos, and they held them to a moderate comparative number of points, which is impressive in its own right. But at some point, the dam's going to break, and if you can't put up points, it's not going to matter. There were some positives, I thought. Jason Morrow got me really stoked, but that might just be because you guys have me on the tight ends. No, I'm really excited. Him and Decker with Gino look like they've got a lot of chemistry going, and if they can keep that together, there might be something budding there. Or if they can stay healthy. I know Amaro's technically questionable for this game, and I don't know what Decker's injury status is on that. But outside of that, there really weren't many positives to take away. I think the linebackers have looked slowed down as the season has gone on. I think Quentin Coples and Demario Davis had a pretty hot start, and they just haven't looked the same as they did earlier in the season. I feel like you could pinpoint all the different issues we've been talking about all season, the secondary, whatever, but I think you see a lot of deterioration happening in the linebackers, which I found to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Sunday was, I think it's easy with a matchup like that to a lot of people just be like, history is going to be made, this is going to be a 58-0 type game. Usually when something seems that predictable, it doesn't happen like that in the NFL. And, Rex has coached a couple good games against Peyton, and I think we've been really, me in particular, been really critical on the job Rex has done this year. I thought he did a terrific job this past Sunday. I really liked the way the Jets attacked Denver on defense. I thought the Jets were up and ready to play. I think they weathered a muff punt. I think they were right there the entire first, half of, they get a better call on that Decker sideline pass where Salas catches a simple out route. They're down one possession at halftime. It would have been really easy for them to kind of fall down 24-7, and they clawed themselves back into the game. We're ultimately, just not being able to, make that one big play late, force that one turnover, have that one offensive drive. But, Denver's more talented than 29 or 30, if not all 30, but one other teams in the NFL. Jets, I think they probably played a B-plus game for them and allowed them to kind of hang around. But, I agree with Gino. I think he took a step in the right direction from San Diego, but it was kind of impossible not to. Obviously, it helps a lot to have Decker healthy. Amaro looks like he is a real player. I mean, for a guy in his 6th career game to have 10 catches, I mean, that's pretty damn impressive. I mean, I don't care what the situation is or what the routes were. To catch 10 passes in an NFL game, it's not an easy thing to do. And that's a really encouraging thing to see because there's teams in the NFL who are doing less with more. Like, the Jets' top 3 receiving options of Eric Decker, Jason Morrow, and Jeremy Curley is not great. It's not one of the better units in the league, but there are teams who are producing more with less at the skill position, and that, especially if you throw in Chris Ivory at running back. And, Gino's still way too erratic. The offensive line was not great, but Gino refuses to use his legs. He looks very rattled by the rush, and he needs to get his confidence back. I don't know if it's going to take a good performance. I don't know if it's going to take a win, but he does not look like the guy who was kind of trending upward towards the end of last year and, started out the season he looked a lot more confident in that first half against Green Bay, And even against Oakland, despite the turnovers, he was taking off, he was running, he was taking more shots, he was playing more aggressive. He looks rattled right now. I don't know what it takes to shake out of that. I don't know if he can shake out of it, but I think we'll probably see him start the rest of the year, and we'll see that, kind of find, how he goes either way. Beyond that, there was kind of some perplexing player usage. It was weird to see Antonio Allen playing 18 snaps. This is a guy that's been jerked around a lot with his use. And I don't see on a secondary as untalented as the Jets how Antonio Allen could only be of use at 18 snaps. And we also saw Copels play a lot less than Babin, which kind of surprising. Might have been a game plan specific thing, but definitely something to kind of monitor going forward. Connor, in terms of the defensive personnel, what did you make of kind of the playing time of Copels and Allen? And how do you think the Jets should distribute reps going forward now that Milner is out for the year, and we're probably under the assumption that Allen and Walls and Adams are the starting corners for the rest of the year?
I haven't rewatched the game because I'm kind of been waiting on the slow coaches film, which Game Rewind has somehow regressed this year. But
that's offense. NFL Game Rewind regressing.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, one look through or two look throughs just on the big screen at work and stuff. It's tough right now because you're trying to run what is regarded as, I wouldn't say a complicated defense, but a man-heavy defense with limited talent, and you can't really run that kind of defense. It's not like the Tampa cover. It's not like a Tampa 2 or like even a cover 3 where you bend but you don't break, and that's the problem with the Jets. They don't have the talent right now to run the defense they want to run. So it's a frustrating situation when you see a guy like Antonio Allen snaps being killed like Julius Thomas. I just don't understand how you take Allen off the field. I don't care where you put him. Play him at the spur position like he played in college if you have to. The guy should be on the field. It's really not that difficult. So, but we've talked about this before. It's Rex and just, I don't know if it's the staff, but this stubborn play. I mean, you have a guy like Adams on the outside in single coverage with no help over the top. It's like hold your breath every time. And, that's not saying he's a bad player, but he's not a Darrelle Revis. And I just don't really understand the direction they're going in. The linebackers are pretty slow. They made no effort to add a player that can make a presence off the edge when they knew that Barnes wouldn't be ready till probably a week from this Sunday is when he should be back. It's just kind of really disappointing. And people could defend Idzik all they want, but the bottom line is you had the means to build this team, or at least build depth around this team, and you sat on your hands because you didn't add a capable cornerback. You didn't even add a depth cornerback like Captain Munnerlyn right now, who's having a very good season in the slot. You didn't add any presence off the edge. You didn't even add a safety to play next to a rookie, Calvin Pryor. So Rex is gonna, he's gonna do what he wants. He's gonna trot out the same old guys every week and leave his rookie in single high half the time, or then bench him. And Milner, who's always hurt, it just doesn't make sense to me what direction this team has right now.
Cole, flipping over to offense with this team, what do you think about kind of the running back usage going forward and the personnel usage going forward? We saw on Sunday that Salas actually played a lot more reps than Curley. We saw Powell was not involved again in the game plan. I think he might have had like 2 touches. He's basically been an afterthought in this offense. Another no-show day from Chris Johnson. Another no-show day from Jeff Cumberland. Zach Sudfeld, I think, played 3 snaps. What do you think about the personnel usage offensively going forward?
Going forward, I think it's pretty obvious. I think the players who can play are making themselves known. At this point, you can't debate that Chris Ivory is the best running back on the team. He needs to start. He needs to get the lion's share of reps. Keep trying to get something out of Chris Johnson, throw him in the slot, have him run stretch plays, but stop running him up the gut, for God's sakes. Powell, I think, should get more playing time. He showed a lot of ability last year in some limited time. Ended up leading the team, leading the team in all-purpose yards. So I think he should get more looks, and Jason Morrow should get all of Cumberland snaps at this point, if you ask me. I know in my tight end article this week I was saying that they should go a lot more 2 tight end looks, but that's just because Cumberland's the next best receiver after Amaro, Decker, and I don't know where Curley's been, but sometimes Curley. And the Salas thing I found interesting because it looks like they're trying to get him into the game plan more. And I think it's pretty specific to his skill set in that he's, I guess, a little more versatile than Curley. But I think it's a shame that they're not trying to get Curley more involved in the offense because really, and it might be different this year, but last year when they had him in and had him worked into the game plan, the offense kind of got humming and got producing. And you just don't see that this year.
Yeah, I mean, Salas has kind of had a weird year because I think he has 8 catches and he's averaging over 20 yards a catch, so he seems to be good for this one huge play game. But it's very weird to see Curley so uninvolved in a few games. I think we saw him play really well against Chicago and he flashed a little bit against Oakland, but just a guy who's been very consistent in the past few years, and he just seems a little out of game plan or out of sorts the past couple weeks. Obviously, something the Jets have to kind of focus on. And, with running back, Chris Johnson, he dropped a screen pass. He did nothing running the ball. At some point, it's just got to be, hey, we got to start giving Powell these reps. I don't know when that point is, but I would have to think it's coming soon. The entire running game was obviously frustrating on Sunday. The Jets were really beat up at the point of attack, and we're going to see O'Day Ibushi playing for Brian Winters now. It would not surprise me if by the end of the year either Dalton Freeman or Dakota Dozier is playing for Willie Colon. Definitely won't be back next year, and very quietly has been just as bad, if not worse, than Brian Winters was. I think the Jets got good value on him last year. I think they went back to the well one too many times on relying on him to be a starter. I think receiver and cornerback are logical spots to complain about the lack of depth here, but guard is right up there with the two of them. It would have been nice to have a guy to push Cologne or another kind of veteran option because Cologne was good last year, but not that good to the point where you should have been that confident that he could start 16 games this year. Before it gets delayed because it's 9 o'clock, and once again, it's 9 o'clock on a Tuesday, and I haven't eaten dinner yet. I don't know what the hell I'm doing with my life because I'm starving to death here. But let's flip it to Jets-Pats real quick. Oddly, after all this negative discussion, I think this is going to be a really good game on Thursday, and not a really good game in the sense that it'll be a really well-played game. There's a ton of injuries on both sides. It's going to be raining, but the Jets at +9, I would definitely take them. I think this is going to be a one-possession game. This is going to be a game that's probably going to come down to the last few minutes. I think the Pats are really, really banged up. I think Rex generally schemes well against the Pats. Brady was 47% on his passes last year against the Jets when they had also a crappy secondary. Hopefully Allen is back on Gronk, and the Jets should be able to run the ball, and if Geno can protect the football, this feels like a game that's going to be like 13-13 in the fourth quarter, very similar to the Week 2 game last year. And if there's any microcosm of a chance of this Jets season being somewhat relevant, they obviously need to win their next 2 games, which are both against AFC East opponents, ironically enough, at New England and then home against Buffalo 10 days later. I think they're going to be in this game in the fourth quarter. I can't in good conscience say I think they're going to win because they've lost 5 games in a row. New England has a better quarterback. New England's going to be home. New England has a better odds of being better prepared in a short week because they have a better veteran quarterback and they have a better coaching staff. And that's not a slight at Rex or the Jets, but New England. I do think they're going to have a chance to win this game. I hope they find a way to steal one late. That way this season could be a little relevant for the 10 days after it, leading up to a home game against Buffalo. But I think it'll be a toss-up. We'll kind of get more into these predictions and stuff tomorrow, but can really see it going either way. Connor, what do you think about the game on Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, you said it pretty perfectly. It's hard to have confidence in a win right now just because they've lost 5 games in a row. But I definitely don't see it getting out of hand. And it's game planning for this one, and it's on a short week, so it's hard to really have confidence. But, I mean, the Pats' injuries are huge, and we can't downplay the D. Milner injury for the Jets, but you lost the captain in the middle of their defense right there, so you got to learn how to run the ball again, and you better learn fast. I mean, Jason Morrow, 35 snaps last week. He's got to be on the field for all of them. When he's targeted 12 times on 35 snaps, and, I mean, we don't even know how many he ran in routes, so he's blocking too. It's just absurd. I really have no explanation for Marty's game planning. I mean, he's trying to run that halfback screen from shotgun every time, and they're reading it to the point where Geno knows they're reading it, and he's throwing the ball away. So I don't know why you wouldn't try, maybe double screens on each side or at least a draw up the middle, something. We got to see something different from the Jets this week if they want to win. It's got to the same vanilla offense It's just not going to work. It's not going to work in New England. It's not going to work on a short week, and it's not going to work against probably the best secondary in football. I think they lose 19-10 in New England.
Cole, what do you think about the matchup?
And just prefacing this statement, I don't think it has anything to do with the fact I think that this is going to be the most competitive game the Jets have played since Oakland, and the most winnable game since Oakland. I think the NFC North in general is just significantly more talented than the AFC East. And then the Chargers and Broncos are probably the two best teams in the AFC. So it's not exactly like they've had any gimmies on the schedule. That being said, I only say that because it's easier than playing the Broncos or the Chargers or the Packers, if you ask me. I think it's going to come down, to the running game, because Erik brought up earlier it's supposed to be wet, it's going to be cold, it's going to be rainy. I don't know if Marty's going to trust the ball in Gino's hands too much this week after last week, ending the game with that pick six. Yeah, he was trending better than the Chargers game, but I think you got to imagine they're going to try and run it, especially like Connor said with Mayo out. And we talked about it. We'll see. We'll see who gets the carries, whether Powell gets some more carries or Ivory, but it just better not be Chris Johnson.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting and potentially frustrating game, because this will be a game the Jets probably have a chance to win. They haven't shown the ability to really win this year since the first week of September. So fingers crossed that they find a way to gut one out in a tough spot in a short week, but it's hard to have a ton of hope and expectations at this point. That's basically going to wrap it up. Obviously, we're going to have a really quick turnaround in the game tomorrow. We'll have a lot more in terms of kind of film breakdowns and everything with the 10-day break between New England and Buffalo, but we'll try to get some stuff up. We'll have our normal kind of predictions and stuff up Wednesday leading up to kickoff on Thursday, and then be ranting away on Twitter as usual, I'm sure, during the game. Thanks, everybody, for listening. 1-5, it can only somewhere to go up right here, you would think. But Connor, final words.
Yeah, 1-5. Let's avoid getting into that conversation about chasing the number one draft pick, because the best prospect in the country is a defensive lineman. So the last thing we need on this team is another first-round defensive lineman. As much as Leonard Williams is great, let's hope the Jets pull off, at least this win and keep them relevant for the next 10 days, like Joe said.
Cole, final words.
Just keep me interested. I'm always gonna watch. I'm always gonna love it. But it's not easy watching a 1-5 team, and hopefully not 1-6.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Just try to beat them. It's always sweet. I don't care what the situation is. A win over New England is always extra sweet and extra enjoyable. So let's hope to get it done. And thanks for listening. We're signing off.
All right, good night, everybody.